everyone! Today we're going to be continuing with our watercolor painting portrait. This video is going to be predominantly focused on adding in our second medium. So if you remember when we were doing our Creative Chance Challenge chart, we were rolling the die and we were determining the steps of our project. So for example, again, just to review, our first column here, whatever number we rolled determined the angle that we were going to take our self-portrait with our camera. The second column was going to determine something that we were going to add or omit from our picture. So mine was no eyes. So I covered my eyes in my picture with my sunglasses. And the third roll is what we're going to be focusing on today in this video. On my third roll, I got 2, which was colored pencil. So in my self-portrait, I'm going to be including colored pencil in with my watercolor paint. And as you can see, I already have done some colored pencil in the background. So that's another thing to take note of. Your background does not need to be the exact same background as your picture. If you would like to omit that and take it out or change it in any way, that's totally up to you. Another aspect of this was the fourth roll, which I got use repetition and pattern. So this is where my background idea came from. Also, this picture was taken when I was on a trip to Portugal and Spain, and a lot of the tiling that you see on the outside of buildings and on the interior of buildings has this type of look to it. So that's where I kind of came up with my idea for the background for this. So you don't have to have a realistic background that matches your self-portrait. If you want to change it to either identify with the place that the picture was taken, or if you want it to be more of a self-representation of who you are or something that you like, or a mood, you can choose colors based on mood as well to convey a little bit more about yourself in your self-portrait. Any of those things are options. It does not have to be the actual background that is in your picture. So I have done the majority of my background here with my colored pencil, but I left this section out here and didn't fill it in yet because I wanted to leave space for my hair. And I'm gonna try using watercolor paint as a base for my hair and then put colored pencil over top to add more of the detail and more of the texture in. So that's what I'm gonna be demonstrating today. And I pretty much have, at this point, the skin the way that I want it to be. I think I might change a little bit in the shirt still, just to add a little bit more detail in the wrinkling. But for the most part, I think that my skin is where I'm gonna leave it, unless I see any really glaring changes that I need to make once I have more of this done. But I am completing that first before I put any other of my messy mediums on. So for example, if for this Creative Chance Challenge, you got charcoal or something else that would be messy on top of your paint, if you were to put water on top, I would leave that and do that at the very end. So I would do all of my painting first, and then I would put that on at the very end. If you mix water with charcoal, it's gonna start running around your paper, and we don't want that to spread. When I'm painting my hair, I'm gonna go about this in a little bit of a different way than when I was doing the skin. I'm going to look more first for my shadowed areas, and I'm gonna fill that in with the paint. And then I'm gonna be using the lighter colors in colored pencil for more of the detail and the texture, because a lot of the lighter areas up here is where I do have my detail and my texture. So I'm switching to a little bit of a bigger brush than what I was using before, just so that I can cover more space and not have to worry about as much streaking since it's a large area. And I won't have as much detail as I was trying to achieve with my skin. I'm gonna start with brown, and I'm gonna do the same thing that I did with my skin. I'm gonna mix some values together to try to get to where I think I need to be. Now, the underside of my hair is pretty dark in this picture, and overall, my hair is a little bit darker than it is in real life. But I'm also gonna be looking at my black and white picture as well, because I think that that's gonna help me find where my shadows are. So I can see here that I have a lot of shadowing right by my ear, on the underside by my neck. There's some shadows up here by my forehead, a little bit in the back here. I think it's a little bit easier to identify on my black and white copy just based on the colors that I have. So I'm gonna be looking at this as well for placement, in addition to looking at my color copy to match colors. So I'm starting off with brown as my base, and I'm gonna mix, we're gonna try a little bit of yellow into this as well, and just see what that gives us. I'm gonna put that on my paper, and then if that looks to be too light, I can always add a little bit more into this and add another layer on top. I'm actually, I think, gonna add a little bit of black in too, just as a shadow. Okay. So we've mixed something that's kind of a deeper color. I'm gonna use that for my shadows. Again, I'm starting off with water mixed in here, and I'm going to start behind my ear here, I think. And again, I'm gonna do this in layers. So for right now, I'm just putting in the areas that I see as dark, but I'm gonna come back to this. And this is something that you can be thinking about with a few of the things that we talked about with the watercolor practice techniques from a few weeks ago. I'm using different parts of my brush to do this. So I'm flattening it out for larger areas, and then for the thinner areas here, I'm using the top part of my brush, which we practiced when we were doing the detail painting box. So you can be thinking about that, how the way that you turn your brush is going to determine how detailed you get with your strokes. And then also thinking about the blooms box that we did, where I told you that if you have something that's already dry and you're going to paint something that's wet next to it, that you need to be mindful that sometimes if you add a lot of water, this is going to seep into the part that's already dry. So I'm being very careful to not add a ton of water right along this edge, or else I know that this watered area is gonna start blooming or seeping into the part that's already dry. So I do have to be careful with this. I'm not using a ton of water for this, not like I was for my skin. I'm using a little bit less water. And right now, I'm just looking for shadowed areas and kind of filling those in. And I know that this is not accurate yet. I'm just filling things in. I'm looking for my shadows, and I'm gonna have to let this dry after I paint this in order to add more to it. And just in terms of trying to make this look like hair, I am getting thinner with my strokes as I get further away, because we do have a lot more of the bulk of the shadows close to my head, and then as we get further away, we're seeing more of the strands in the picture. So I'm trying to make that effect by simply using the top part of my brush instead of the side when I get further away from my head. Now I know that this needs to be darker right away, so I'm gonna start adding a little bit more deeper shadows into this. So I am gonna mix a little bit more black into this brown that I made for myself, and just start to use a little bit less water in hopes that that's gonna give me more of a pigmented paint rather than a watered down diluted paint. And again, I'm being very careful when I get close to my head and my neck that's already been dry for a while. And I might even benefit now from just kind of letting all of this dry before I get any closer with any more water, for fear that I'm going to start seeping into the dry area. But I am gonna do just kind of like a lighter wash over top of pretty much everywhere that I feel like I have hair in this picture. And I'm gonna be doing a lot more of these loose strands with colored pencil afterwards, but I'm gonna at least begin by painting everything. And then I'm going to use lighter colored pencils to make some of the lighter highlights in the strands. This is just base layer first, like we did with the skin. I'll be adding to this and changing it to the way I want it to be. This is just a place to start. All right, so at this point I have all of my hair painted. I have a few strands painted out, and I might add just a few more of these coming off of the back of my head because my hair is blowing in the picture. But I am gonna wait for this to completely dry before I do anything else to it, before I add any more paint to it, before I add my colored pencils to it. So we're gonna leave it off here, and we're gonna pause for a few minutes to let this completely dry, and then we will come back to it. So it is important that if you're going to layer colored pencils or any other type of medium on top of watercolor paint, you need to make sure that the paint is completely dry before you go over it with anything that has like a sharper point to it. So the fear is that if we were to color over top of this, if the paper wasn't completely dry, then this could rip the paper. So what I'm looking for when I'm checking my paper here is it cold? And if it still feels cold to the touch, then it is not ready for me to draw on top of. That means it's still wet. I have an area up here that's completely dry, so I am going to show you just in this section up here, layering some pencils on top of that. And I've chosen a few colors that I'm going to be layering to make my hair color. I'm going to start with this lighter color here, and I'm going to be filling that in where I know I have some highlights on the top of my hair up here. And it is nice to have this brown as a base that I already painted with, because it's making this pencil color not as vibrant of a yellow, which is really good because that's not what I wanted. So I'm adding some of this in areas that I'm seeing highlights. Now this can be pretty loose too because it's hair, so it doesn't need to be the circle shading that we've worked on in the past with colored pencil. So when I'm doing hair texture, I am making little tiny lines. I have this really dark shadow right here, so I'm working to put that in with some lighter brown first, and then I'm going to go into some darker brown. So the goal in all of this, in putting watercolor paint first, is I don't want to completely cover over the watercolor paint, or else I would have just started with colored pencil and used colored pencil for the whole thing. So I do want to leave some of my paint visible, and it's almost like an underglaze, and I'm putting my color on top of that. So think about still being able to see some of this, but not really using it as the full degree of what you want your hair to look like or any other area, but just more as like a beginning step that you're going to be layering on top of to just make the underglaze of your color. So I will show in the next video kind of the conclusion of this, and then how we're going to be incorporating the final steps, these last 3 columns of our Creative Chance Challenge chart. So stay tuned for that video.